it's here, that first, well, 0th project. So what you're going to be doing, if you don't already know, is implementing the game 2048, which is this game, which you may have played in the past. In fact, this particular interface is going to seem mighty familiar very soon. Okay, so that's what you're going to be doing, writing this game. Cool. A lifetime of cloning video games and achieving ill-gotten fortunes with Angry Bird ripoffs and so forth will now be open to you. So the spec for the assignment is here. This is the document in which all of the information you really need is, minus what's in the code. Okay, and so I just want to give a very brief introduction to, well, somewhat brief introduction to how to even get started with this thing. So certainly the spec is going to be your go-to place for information. But yeah, after you've checked it out, I think a great thing to do is just make this thing, see what happens. Okay, well I've already made, so I'll do make clean, so we can enjoy the experience of making together. Okay, so we do make, and the game is made. Okay, so let's try playing this game. So in this case, to start it up, I'll do game 2048.main, and it's a slightly different syntax because this is now a package. I'll talk about that in a minute. But here, when we start the game up, we see that our version of the game is really boring. In fact, about the most boring game you can imagine. It does nothing. Okay, so our goal is to fix that and make it into a fun game we can all enjoy. So we go into, say, game 2048.main, and let's open up the file we're going to be working on. So we'll see that this is part of a package called game 2048, and we'll talk in class. We have not yet, as of time of this video, it is September 13th. But we'll talk a little bit about this later. But I guess the big picture is if we look at this code, we give you a big long file with a ton of stuff in it already. Okay, and it is not important, I will say, to understand every line of this code before you get started. I'm going to say that instead you should let the knowledge roll into your brain gradually as you experiment with it as you go. Okay, so I guess backing up just a little bit, though, I'll say that the only file that you need to write that does not involve testing is going to be this main.java. There's also this folder, which has stuff that you should not mess with. There's certainly things in here that if you change, it will make our grader very unhappy. So I'd urge you not to change anything in here. Or at least check with us first if you want to. But the only thing you need to edit is here in main. And that's where you're going to put all the game logic. Okay. So how would I get started? Well, I'd certainly give this a read. Maybe I wouldn't necessarily digest everything, but get a feeling for what's in here. And then maybe it'd be a nice thing to, you've tried running it on your computer, you looked at the spec, so maybe let's now see if we can modify the universe that I'm provided with. So I know that when I start up a program in Java, the main function gets called. And I say, what does main do? Oh gosh, okay, well it calls this crazy thing, and then this, I guess. Okay, but this is the interesting thing. So wallgame.play. So let's go check out play. So this is how I, when I first approached it, more or less looked at it. And I see, okay, here's the game. Forever, set a random piece. Okay, well I know from the spec it said each time I make a move, a random piece comes, that must be that. Then we get a key from the game, and then stuff happens. Okay, so I'm pressing a key, and this is our hook into into what the user is doing, and we're supposed to make the world react appropriately. Okay, so I don't know. A thing I might do is let's see what happens if I just print out key. So I'd say there is a time and a place for print statements. This seems like a good one. I'm learning how this program works, so let's do it. Just throw it in there and make. Try rerunning our game. So I open it up. Oh, I'm in the wrong folder. Okay. So I open it up, and now when I push buttons, arrows appear. Okay, cool. I guess this brings up an interesting point, which is that on Macs, apparently arrows happen, but in other operating systems, it's expecting up, down, left, and right to be there. I think we might deploy a fix to the skeleton, but if not, I guess one way you can get around this is let's just say, okay, well, if someone happens to push the up key, I know from the logic down here that in fact I should, oh, not return. Let's just change that to up. We'll translate for it. Hopefully you won't need to do this, but you know, if you get started now, that's one of those things. So let's just try running it again. Now okay, now when I push the up key, the word up appears, okay? And that's good, since I know that these are the 4 inputs that apparently the code is expecting, okay? So part of reading skeleton code is getting familiar with those kind of things. There's a lot here, and I guess one very important point here is just don't feel obligated to understand every word of this and every word of this before you get started, because you'll never get anywhere, right? You'll learn by experimenting with the code base and have just a much better time, okay? So that's the first, that's the first thing I've done here. The reason it was doing that is because I was in the wrong window. Okay, well, I know I'm ultimately going to have to make a game that looks like this, where stuff moves around. So the next thing I would do, personally, is figure out, well, how do I get a tile here, all right? So knowing that when I look at the play loop, or the play function, set random piece, okay, let's check out what that's supposed to be all about. Add a random tile to a random empty position. This seems like a great place to start. So I would look at the documentation and so forth and see if I can get that working at least. And so I'll show you what the next step when I worked on this was. I do some experiments, and eventually I find that you know, I make enough progress that when I start the game up, boom, all right, cool, a tile appears. Now none of the buttons do anything yet because I haven't done that part of the assignment yet. But every time I start it up, hey, new tile location. That's exciting, but not fun enough. I want to be able to actually move tiles. Now, obviously, the act of merging tiles and having to think about the logic for moving left versus right versus up versus down, keeping tiles from running into each other and overlapping and all that, that's complicated, okay? That's going to be a lot of the work. But before I even get there, I figured, okay, well, you know, I have this whole set of functions I'm supposed to be able to use to manipulate the universe. So I'm going to write something that is able to move things, okay? So I'm going to write code that just sort of makes a first pass at the act of trying to move things upwards, okay? I'm only going to think about up. I'm not going to worry about tiles running into each other. And so I'll look at this API. Maybe I'll open up game.java. So this is the file that contains all the functions you can call to manipulate the graphical the graphics for the game. And so I say, oh, okay, well, this is move tile. That's the one I'm going to use. I look here, and there's also this thing about display moves. And I'll do some experimentation, right? And there might be some frustration as I do this. But what I'm trying to do now is just prove that I can manipulate the universe before I try and do it in a smart way, okay? So what I happened to come up with when I did my first initial experiment with this was as follows. Oh, I gotta make. So I start this thing up, and okay, so I can only push the up arrow. And when I push up, okay, in this case, I was able to get it to move up. Now, my first pass of this was so dumb that when I push up again, I get an exception, and it says, well, there's no tile here to move. There's no tile at 3-3. So I didn't do something I was supposed to do, and that's fine, because all I wanted to do is prove to myself that I can move a tile, and next I'll try and obey things like, you know, physics. I can't move things that don't allow. I guess I should bring up here that the game class, so you can think of game as it tracks the state of the universe that's going to be drawn. If you try and tell the GUI, hey, move something from 3-3 and it's not there, you'll get exceptions. So you'll see things like this. That's a nice sanity check, right? So the next thing we might do is maybe improve the moving functionality. Okay, so up next, I figured out how I can move tiles up safely. So see it collided, it's no longer crashing. I have some print statements here that I was using for safety, and it's very exciting. Now, right now, my game does not work if I try going left, right, or down. And the reason for that is, that just looks like it's more work, right? There's some game logic. So I go, do. Eventually, I get to this spot where, okay, now I can't do anything else. If I try pushing right, for example, I guess I don't have it doing anything. All right. Who knows what's up now? All right. Yeah, if I try pushing left or right or down, though, my code would not work. Okay, great. So I'll show you the next thing I did real quick. So after some more programming, I get to the point where, hey, I can not just push the up arrow and move things around, but I can also do left and down and right and so forth. Um, and another stepping stone as I go. Now, obviously, at this point, the game is missing some key features like merging, and all the blocks are moving around just a little bit at a time, and somehow I seem to be getting really unlucky and only getting 2. That's surprising. I promise it can really make 4s, though. I saw it earlier. But at this point, I'm able to do just some basic stuff. And there's a lot more stuff to go from here, but at least now I have made some substantial progress, all right? So I would say this notion of incrementally developing and experimenting and coming to understand the code in this way is going to be super important. I guess another important thing to bring up is we put a lot of effort into JUnit testing, and JUnit testing is awesome. But the difference between what we were doing before and what we're doing now is that here the thing under test is a game. In fact, it's a big complicated system. It interacts with a human, and trying to write tests that'll mimic us as a human is just going to be a pain, right? So I would say that while you're starting, you should really just rely on the ad hoc, okay, I'm just going to run it and see what it does approach. Though I think that you will be able to find places to use, say, JUnit. One possibility is, in this case, I have a helper method that's making, remember that abstraction is our enemy. We have to find ways to defeat it. Any place you can find a nice, clean abstraction, code it up as a method. And those type of things you can JUnit test if you want. You can feel confident in their ability to do their job. The other place you might find JUnit testing, though, useful, is in the middle of your methods here. You can, for example, say, let's say I've imported JUnit. I could say assert equals, and then I could pick some condition that really better be true. Okay, and so your code will be constantly monitoring itself, right? Little self checks. And if it ever sees something it doesn't like, it will crash in a way that says, look out, this horrible thing has happened, and this is exactly what you need to know. So you might also consider using assert statements like that. Okay, well, again, I think the high-level picture philosophically is feel free to jump in and experiment and get your feet wet and get things going. And later, once you've gotten a lot done, then you can start using all the fancy instrumentation and testing thing where we can mimic humans. Okay, so I hope you enjoy the experience of trying to build here your first medium-sized system. And, we're ready for the flood, so bring it on Piazza, and let's get this thing going. So enjoy, and I'll see you in the next video.